The first shot came through the saloon window just after midnight, and it was not meant for the man standing beside the piano. Clara Bell heard the glass break before she understood the gunfire. She dropped the ledger in her hands and hit the floor. A cowboy in a dust-covered black coat stepped between her and the shattered window. "Stay down!" Another bullet tore through the wall. Clara stared at him. She had never seen the man before. Who are they? Men who don't like questions. That isn't an answer. No. He looked at her. And you ask too many. 3 more shots cracked outside. The cowboy drew his revolver, fired twice toward the door, and silence followed. He returned to Clara and picked up the ledger. His eyes settled on the worn leather cover. "Where did you get this?" "Give it back." "That depends. On what?" "Whether you know what you've got?" Clara snatched it from his hand. "I know it belongs to me." The stranger gave a faint smile. "My name is Jonah Mercer." Clara knew that name. Everybody. In Red Hollow, did not Jonah Mercer had once ridden with Army scouts along the southern trails. Some called him a gunfighter. Others called him a drifter. He had disappeared for years and returned only recently, working wherever horses, cattle, or hard men needed. Handling. Clara had no reason to trust him, but he had just stood between her and a bullet. She pulled the ledger. Beneath her coat. "I don't need a protector." "I didn't offer to be one." "Then why are you still here?" Jonah glanced toward the broken window. "Because those men weren't shooting at me." Clara's stomach tightened. "They came for you?" "I believe they did." Red Hollow was a hard frontier town in the New Mexico territory, where dust slipped beneath every door and a man's reputation could travel farther than his horse. Clara had lived there for 6 years. At 26, she had learned not to expect rescue. She kept the books at the Red Hollow Mercantile, repaired harness when the stable boys were short-handed, and knew enough about horses to spot a lame gelding from across a pasture. Her father had vanished. 12 years earlier, during a cattle drive, her mother had been left with debts. Clara had never stopped, wondering what happened. Then, a month earlier, she discovered something strange in the mercantile accounts. Cattle were disappearing. From small ranches, 10 head here, 6 there, a dozen from a widow's pasture. Everyone called it rustling. But Clara found another pattern. Every missing herd had been insured through the same agency. Every claim passed through the office of Silas Rourke. Rourke owned the largest ranch in Red Hollow County. He was respected in church, generous at public dinners, and powerful enough to lend money to half the valley. Clara had begun to suspect that his kindness was only another kind of business. The ledger she had carried into the blue lantern contained the first proof. Her father's name was written inside. The entry was 12 years old. It showed that the cattle drive on which her father supposedly disappeared had never left Red Hollow. Someone had sold the herd. 3 days after the men vanished, someone had signed the receipt. Clara had copied the page she had taken, the original ledger, because she no longer knew whom she could trust. Now men were shooting at her. Jonah opened the back door. "Come on, I can walk." "Home?" "I believe you." He looked into the dark. "Street. I also believe whoever hired those men knows where you live." That stopped her. They left through the back. Red Hollow was nearly empty. Wind scraped along the wooden boardwalk, and a few yellow lamps burned behind dusty windows. When they reached the mercantile, Clara unlocked the front door. She knew immediately that someone had been there. Drawers stood open. Papers covered the floor. The backroom lock had been broken. Clara rushed inside. The ledger was gone. Not the one she had carried. The older one. The original record, containing her father's signature. Jonah studied the broken lock. They knew exactly what they wanted. They took the only evidence? No. He looked at her. They took one piece of it. Clara opened the ledger she had saved. The Copied page was still there. Jonah's expression hardened. Then whoever did this knows you found something. Hoofbeats sounded outside. Several. Riders stopped in front of the mercantile. A man's voice called from the street. "Find the girl?" Clara recognized him. "Elias Vane. Who is he?" "Rourke's foreman." Jonah extinguished the lamp. Back door. They slipped into the alley and hurried toward Clara's house. The bedroom was dark. Mother? No answer. The bed was empty. Her mother's shawl lay on the floor. Clara froze. Jonah found a piece of paper beneath the pillow. 3 words had been written in charcoal. "Bring the ledger." Clara's knees weakened. "My mother." Jonah caught her arm. "We'll find her." "You don't understand." "I have to." "I understand." He studied the message. "But first, you need to understand what you're carrying." Clara reached beneath the bed and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were a brass key, a silver locket, and a letter. Her father's letter. She had kept it sealed for 12 years. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first line made her stop breathing. "If you're reading this, Clara," then Silas Rourke finally. "Found what I hid," Jonah read over her shoulder. Neither spoke. The letter explained that Thomas Bell had discovered Rourke was using false cattle loss claims to force small ranchers off their land. He had gathered proof and hidden it where no one would think to look. The final line was short. "Trust. No badge in Red Hollow." Clara folded the letter. "My father knew." Jonah looked toward the dark street. "Then this is bigger than cattle." A horse whinnied outside. Then came a woman's cry from somewhere beyond town. Clara knew that. Voice. "Mother." She grabbed the brass key. Jonah reached for his rifle. "Where does that key lead?" Clara looked toward the distant hills. The old railroad water. "Tower." Jonah mounted his horse. Then, "We'd better ride." Clara climbed onto her father's old mare. They disappeared into the darkness while behind them 3 riders entered her empty house, and one of them carried a message for Silas Rourke. The girl had found the key. They found Martha Bell just before dawn. She was tied to a fence post beside an abandoned line shack, guarded by Elias Vane and Silas Rourke himself. Clara stepped from the shadows. "Let her go." Rourke turned. He looked nothing like the smiling rancher who shook hands at church. He held a rifle loosely across his arm. "You should have gone home, Clara. You took my mother. I borrowed her. You don't get to call kidnapping a loan." For the first time, Rourke's smile disappeared. Jonah stood beside Clara. "Untie her." Rourke looked at him. "Mercer, you always did have a weakness for other people's trouble." "My brother worked for you." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "That old story again." Jonah's voice hardened. "My brother disappeared 6 years ago. He was a thief." "He was your bookkeeper." Silence. Clara understood. Jonah had not come to Red Hollow by accident. He had been hunting Rourke, too. Rourke looked at Clara. "Your father was the same kind of fool. He thought paper could defeat men with money." "You killed him," I warned him. "And when he wouldn't stop?" Rourke said nothing. Martha pulled against the rope. "Clara, don't give him anything." Rourke sighed. "You see? Your mother understands how the world works." Clara lifted her chin. "No, she understands what cowards do when they're afraid." The words had barely left her mouth when a shot shattered the lantern. Darkness swallowed the grove. Jonah fired. Men shouted. Clara dropped behind the fence. Elias rushed toward her. She grabbed the fallen rifle and fired. He dropped, clutching his shoulder. Jonah cut Martha free. Rourke had escaped. Martha gripped Clara's hands. You opened your father's letter. You knew about it. I knew he left something. I never knew where. Clara showed her the brass key. The proof is at the old water tower. Jonah looked toward the northern hills. Then that's where we're going. They rode before sunrise. The land opened beneath a pale gray sky. Clara rode beside Jonah in silence until she finally asked the question that had been waiting between them. Why are you really here? Jonah kept his eyes on the trail. My brother. What happened to him? He found out what Rourke was doing. Clara's expression softened. And you think Rourke killed him? I know he did. They reached the abandoned railroad tower late that morning. Clara climbed into the old maintenance box. The brass key opened a rusted compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a tin case. She opened it. There were account sheets, land transfers, signed statements, and names. Ranchers, bankers, a judge, and Sheriff Amos Crowley. Jonah stared at the list. That's why nobody stopped him. Clara shook her head. Not stopped. She looked toward Red Hollow. Bought. Then they heard horses. Rourke's men had followed them. Jonah grabbed the evidence. Ride! They raced south. Bullets struck the dirt behind them. Clara's mare stumbled. Jonah turned back. Keep going! I won't leave you! He looked at her. Good. They rode together. A narrow canyon finally forced the pursuing riders to slow. Jonah knew the trail and led Clara through a hidden passage between the rocks. They escaped into an abandoned mining cabin. Only then did Clara notice blood on Jonah's sleeve. You're shot. Just a scratch. She cut away the cloth. It needs cleaning. You always this stubborn? Yes. Good. She cleaned the wound. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then Jonah removed a folded paper from his coat. My brother wrote this before he disappeared. Clara read it. Rourke is buying the county one piece at a time. If I disappear, trust no badge. She looked up. Why didn't you show me? I didn't know if I could trust you. And now? Jonah met her eyes. Now I do. The silence that followed was different. Not awkward. Not empty. Something had changed. They returned to Red Hollow the next morning, but the town was waiting for them. Sheriff Crowley stood in front of the courthouse with armed men. Martha was beside him, her hands tied. Rourke stepped forward. You have something that belongs to me. Clara held the tin case. You mean the truth? Rourke smiled. Truth doesn't matter unless someone has the power to enforce it. He nodded toward Crowley. The sheriff raised his rifle. Rourke looked at Clara. Give me the papers. Clara looked at her mother. Then at Jonah. He did not tell her what to do. He trusted her to decide. Clara opened the case. Rourke smiled. She tore the papers in half. His face changed. You fool. Clara dropped the pieces into the dirt. You thought that was the only copy. Rourke stared at her. There are 3. Crowley went pale. Clara faced him. Your name is on every page. The sheriff looked at Rourke. Rourke turned toward him. You told me there was only one set. A murmur spread through the crowd. Clara had mailed copies before leaving town, one to the territorial newspaper, one to the federal land office, and one to a judge in Santa Fe. Rourke's entire plan had depended on destroying evidence before it could leave Red Hollow. He had failed. A distant bell sounded. Then wagons appeared at the far end of the street. 3 federal marshals rode into town with the territorial judge. The crowd parted. The judge unfolded a warrant. Silas Rourke, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, land theft, and the murder of Thomas Bell. Rourke looked around. For the first time, he looked like an ordinary man. He looked at Clara. "You think this makes you safe?" Clara shook her head. "No." She looked at Jonah. "It makes us free." Rourke was taken away. Sheriff Crowley followed. Elias Vane later testified against Rourke in exchange for a reduced sentence. The stolen ranches were returned where the law allowed. Martha went home, and Clara reopened the mercantile, but she changed the back room. The shelves once filled with secret accounts became a place where local ranchers could bring land papers, bills, and contracts without being cheated by men who knew more about ink than they did. Clara had spent years believing her father's disappearance was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Now she understood something. His final act had not been disappearing. It had been leaving her the truth. Spring came to Red Hollow. The cottonwoods turned green. The town began to heal. Jonah stayed. At first he said he was repairing fences for the ranchers. Then he said he was helping with the freight road. Clara knew neither explanation was the whole truth. One evening she found him outside the mercantile repairing a saddle. "You're still here." He looked up. "Looks that way. You ever going to leave?" Jonah thought for a moment. "I used to think leaving was the same thing as being free. And now? Now I think freedom might mean having somewhere worth staying." Clara smiled. She touched the brass key around her neck. "My father spent his life protecting things he believed mattered." Jonah looked at her. "What matters to you?" She looked across town. Her mother was watering flowers. Children ran along the street. The ranchers were rebuilding fences on land that had almost been taken from them. Then she looked back at Jonah. "Things worth keeping?" Jonah reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small brass key. Clara stared at it. "I found it at the old railroad station. What does it open?" He smiled. "Nothing yet." She laughed. "Then why give it to me?" "Because some doors are better when you choose what goes behind them." Clara took the key. There was no grand promise, no rescue, no debt, just a choice. She reached for his hand. Jonah took it. Years later, people in Red Hollow would tell the story differently. Some said Jonah Mercer brought down Silas Rourke. Others said Clara Bell did. The truth was simpler. Rourke destroyed himself the moment he believed every person had a price. Clara gave the truth a voice. Jonah gave her someone she could trust. And the people of Red Hollow finally learned that a powerful man could own land, cattle, buildings, and even a sheriff's silence. But he could not own the truth forever. Behind Clara's desk hung a small wooden frame containing one line from her father's letter. "Never let a powerful man convince you that his power is the same thing as your worth." She kept it there for every person who entered her office feeling small. Not because she needed the reminder, because someone else might. Outside, Jonah waited beside two horses. Clara locked the door. "Where are we going?" "North pasture." "Why?" "There is a calf that thinks fences are suggestions." Clara shook her head. "Then I suppose someone should teach it otherwise." Jonah held out his hand. She took it. They rode beneath the evening sky while the last light settled over the New Mexico hills. The frontier had never been easy. It demanded courage from people who had very little. It tested the honest. It punished the careless. And sometimes, if two people were fortunate, it gave them a reason to stay. Did you see the truth behind Rourke before Clara did? Tell me what you would have done in her place and let me know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories of the Old West, subscribe and ride with us into the next one.